Hi, everyone. Welcome to Interchange. I'm Dan Jones. Thank you so very much for joining us. We are going to have some interesting conversations today. Did the Milwaukee police officers involved in the Derek Williams case get away with murder, or were they exonerated as they should have been? We'll talk about the ongoing criticism that Governor Scott Walker is treating Milwaukee poorly. And we'll talk about one of the worst starts to a season the Milwaukee Brewers have ever had. All right, let me introduce everybody. Joel McNally, longtime newspaper columnist. Kevin Fischer, former broadcast journalist, political analyst, oftentimes a fill-in host over on WISN Talk Radio. You know Denise Callaway, community affairs and public relations professional. And of course, Gerard Randall, education consultant and local job creation expert. Rick Horowitz will be along with commentary at the end of the show. All right, first let's talk about the Derek Williams case. He's the suspect who died gasping for air in the back of a Milwaukee police car. The officers apparently thought he was faking. First, the state decided there was not enough evidence to bring charges against the officers involved. Now, the federal government has reached that same conclusion. Does this mean that the officers didn't do anything wrong, or does it simply mean that prosecutors didn't think they could convince a jury that these specific officers broke any laws? Kevin.
Okay, two questions there. One, in hindsight, yes, they erred by not realizing that Derek Williams was not faking. I've talked to many police officers, and they tell me that this happens more often than not, that when they have someone arrested and in custody in the back seat of their vehicles, they will often feign an illness or an injury. And trying to check them out and take them out of the handcuffs, that can create some problems for the officers. So yes, they did err by not realizing that he wasn't faking. When they realized he wasn't faking, then they did try to do whatever they could to help him. And now the second question was,
do you think that should they be considered innocent?
Yes, you have a special prosecutor, you have the DA's office, you have Barack Obama's Department of Justice all saying that there wasn't enough evidence to make a criminal conviction. Now, did they err? Yes, I just said that. But not to the extent that there was an intention to murder that young man. I think if the family's looking for justice, they probably will have a better chance in a civil lawsuit where the standards are different than in a criminal case.
Denise, should some of the blame be focused on Derek Williams himself? Somebody mentioned, okay, well, if he didn't put himself in the position of being a suspect running from the police, he wouldn't have been in the back of the squad car to begin with.
That is really an interesting way to look at that. I don't think I've ever heard anything quite like that before. The issue here is that in hindsight, we are all seeing this video of Mr. Williams pleading for help, gasping for air in the back of the police car, the squad car. And that can't help but have everyone wonder, how can you have something like this that occurred and then no charges filed either at the state level or at the federal level? And I watched actually most of the news conference as the Department of Justice was explaining why it was not going to file charges. And I think there are a couple of things to remember that don't make it any easier when we look at that video. One is that these officers were not, first of all, kind of able to see what we saw. There were people who were in and out of the car, different people at different times who were observing his condition. No one saw, in essence, what we saw looking at that video. The lighting had been enhanced, other things happened that really did not allow officers to have the kind of view that we had. The other thing that I think made it very difficult for either the state or the feds to file charges is the cause of death. That there was confusion about the cause of death. Was it a sickle cell crisis? The feeling was that yes, it could be, and there were no visible signs of injury to Mr. Williams. Those are things that made it hard to do. I agree with Kevin. Clearly, the officers did something that they regret to this day. It's not just what Mr. Williams and his family regret. Those officers regret this as well. But I think it shows how difficult it can be for a variety of different reasons in these cases that involve individuals who die in police custody. It's very difficult, and my heart breaks for the Williams family. They want some answers, and they want to feel like they have some justice. And for them, they feel like they haven't gotten it so far.
Some very, very respected individuals have reviewed this case, and many of them now have reached the conclusion that we are not going to charge these officers. Does that make you tend to think, well, justice has been served then?
No, because I think the law is wrong. I agree that under the law, under the law at the state level and at the federal level, everybody who reviewed it, and many people that I respect very much, said it would be very difficult to get a conviction because you have to prove that they wanted him to die. And I don't think even the family or the people in the community who are protesting think that the police wanted him to die. They just didn't care. And that's the problem with the law. The problem with the law, and the law has been written to protect the police. The law has been written, to assume that the police are doing the right thing, and that, these assumptions they make about the people they arrest and stop, that they're criminal, they're faking stuff, they're just troublemakers, and their concerns are beneath us. That's what's wrong. And that's what needs to change. The culture in the police department needs to change, to have that attitude towards citizens of the community. Because they may have broken the law, and in this case it's not even clear this individual did. They may have broken the law, does not mean you should not have utmost concern for their safety and their lives. And that's what bothers the family and bothers the community. The idea that negligence itself would not be criminal is kind of alien to most of us, because we know all kinds of people, ordinary citizens, get charged with negligence that leads to death and horrible consequences. Drunk drivers don't get in their cars intending to kill somebody, but they go to prison for a long, long time if they do. And that's negligence. It is disregard for the safety. And these individuals, these police officers, I have to say, they were acting based on their attitudes and their experience. And that's what's sad about it, because this individual was crying for help, and they could care less.
We talk about these kind of cases every couple of years. Is it important to remember that police officers deal with weird situations every single night? And so do we have to look at it differently, knowing that they deal with strange circumstances every single night?
Well, it's unfortunate that every couple of years we do have to have these discussions. It all comes down to, unfortunately, judgment calls that were made. Judgment calls by the police led to, unfortunately, the death of this young man. Judgment calls by the prosecutors, or potential prosecutors in this case, led to an unwillingness to want to prosecute. They had certainly lots of latitude. They could have brought it to trial and taken a chance to say that the message we want to send to the community is that this was wrong. The way the police treated them was wrong. If they get exonerated by a jury, they get exonerated. But we took it to a jury rather than to make the call beforehand and remove it from any possibility of having 12 others make their judgment as to whether or not the police were right or wrong. I feel in many ways, like Kevin had pointed out, civil case. That's the last opportunity. But, it's so base in so many ways, because now you're talking about a financial settlement versus a settlement that's based on the moral right or wrongness of the actions that resulted in a person's life being taken away from them.
All right. Next topic. It seems like the criticism of Governor Scott Walker by Milwaukee Democrats never ends. Aldermen, county supervisors are constantly criticizing him for not doing enough for Milwaukee. Last week, Milwaukee Police Chief Ed Flynn complained loud and clear that Walker was intent on hurting Milwaukee. Walker responds that no governor in recent history has done more for the city of Milwaukee, and that it wouldn't make any political sense whatsoever for him to alienate the state's largest city and its hundreds of thousands of voters. Denise.
Well, except that those are hundreds of thousands of voters that, for the most part, don't tend to vote for Republicans. So I do think that you certainly, and I agree, it wouldn't make any sense for any governor to try to alienate or do things that hurt the state, the city that is the economic engine of the state. But in fact, there are things that have been done that absolutely do hurt Milwaukee or in some ways are designed to, kind of pay back Milwaukee, the city of Milwaukee or the mayor for political things that have happened in the past. I still am trying to figure out how it's the state's business in terms of the composition and the powers of the Milwaukee County Board of Supervisors. I don't get how that's in the state's interest. I do not understand how it has been in the interest of the state, and something this governor did. Milwaukee is facing a huge foreclosure crisis, but the governor took tens of millions of dollars that were specifically set aside to help communities like Milwaukee struggling with foreclosures. He took it away and spent it on something else. It was not literally his money to spend that way. That was not the way the money was intended to be spent, but that's the way he decided to spend it. And I won't even talk about what is taking place to public education in this city, in this community, in part because the governor has proposed an increase to the, well, if you want to call it an increase, because it's not money that really comes to schools, but the $50 increase that's right now out there in terms of what the governor has proposed doesn't even come close to meeting even the rate of inflation. And oh, by the way, schools can't spend it anyway because they don't have the ability to spend it. It's all going to go back to property tax relief. When you take a look, and I've just mentioned some of these things, when you look at a series of things that have been done, it does, and compare that to some things that the governor has done, the deep hurt that has been done to this community is something that is not offset by the handful of things that have happened.
Kevin, it's important to point out, though, isn't it, that there are people who think that everything that Walker is doing is exactly what needs to be done for the city of Milwaukee because other things have not worked over the years.
They just don't happen to live here.
He could find the cure for cancer tomorrow, and he would be vilified. There are people that just don't like him; they hate him, and they don't want to see him get any political victories.
You can't equate disagreeing with him with hating him.
Some
You know,
people
you do
actually
that,
do
but you
hate
do
him,
that all
and
the time. But don't do that after I've just said
threatened his
that.
family and himself, and have protested outside his home. That to me, that's hatred. Okay.
Protest is democratic.
Let me throw another perspective out here. The chief of police goes into a hissy fit and says there's a war on Milwaukee because of three issues: the residency change, the whole idea that we're not going to charge out of Milwaukee ratepayers to pay for the downtown trolley, and that $650,000 allocation that was cut. Now, on the surface, a $650,000 price tag, sounds like a lot of money, but it's 1/3 of 1% of his $240 million budget. If the police chief really felt that $650,000 was important, he could do some shifting around and take care of that very quickly. So, if you oppose the change in residency, if you want to cut $650,000 out of the police chief's budget, if you don't want to see the boondoggle of the downtown trolley, you're just a no good, rotten, evil, hating Republican.
And that's not what he said.
I just think that argument is foolish. And the state has been very generous to Milwaukee, including under this governor. I mean, you can talk about the billions of dollars in highways and roads and welfare and housing assistance and economic development aid. I guess we tend to forget about that. And one more thing. Apparently, the feud between Ed Flynn and the Journal-Sentinel, I guess that's over because now Ed Flynn is attacking the governor. So suddenly now the Journal sees fit to print a 1,300-word attack on the governor in which only 125 words were supportive of it.
Of course, this is the same paper that twice, not once, but twice, decided that it would endorse the governor for re-election. So I'm sure you
that's the editorial board, not the people who write the news.
Is Walker treating Milwaukee horribly?
The beauty of having political parties that lead government is that you have competing visions. There happen to be some things, in fact, a number of things that I think Governor Walker was dead on. Tax reduction is one of those things. I think the party itself has come around in its support for public education. The reality is nearly half, of the Milwaukee County delegation in the legislature are Republicans, and they have a different view of how government statewide ought to be run. And just as there were disagreements when Governor Doyle was governor and He proposed a number of things that were anathema to many people in the Republican Party. In fact, he proposed a number of things that were anathema to the residents of the city of Milwaukee. And we didn't hear this same level of outcry at some of his devastating policies. I've come to the conclusion that if the mayor and others were sincere in their opposition to this and not just hiding that behind the smokescreen because some of the pet projects were not funded by the state or were derailed in some instances by the state, we wouldn't have this conversation.
But in politics, you can't get everything you want, and you won't, and that's not because somebody hates you or is out to get you or hurt you. It's just the political reality.
Is it fair to say that
no
Walker...
focus on any other municipality when it comes to what's been done in this legislative session than there has been on Milwaukee?
Is it fair to say, though, that Governor Walker has a vision for Milwaukee, and it's very different than Barrett's vision for Milwaukee is or Doyle's vision for Milwaukee is? But does that mean he hates Milwaukee?
Different. No, but it means it's a very ugly vision. You know, Kevin mentioned a $650,000, cut. He didn't mention what that was about, which was to track bullets. They have technology to tell when shots are fired, to tell where they're coming from, to locate the sources of murder and violence in our poorest neighborhoods. And to cut that money out is vicious. That is simply ugly. A possibility to expand that program. You're talking about human lives here. You're talking about the lives of children. That's an ugly vision. Everything that Denise said that's been cut, and everything that Kevin said that has been cut from Milwaukee, plus many more things. We haven't even mentioned the state shared revenue to cities, of which Milwaukee is, of course, the largest city, but every city in the state of Wisconsin has lost what was built up over decades, recognition that the cities of the state of Wisconsin need shared revenue from the state because only the state can collect income taxes. And that was built up ever since Henry Meyer was mayor of Milwaukee and fought for it, and actually it's one of the best things he ever did to get it. He and Pat Lucy started that program, and it's the most far-seen, intelligent sharing of resources between the state and the cities in this state. And guess what? Scott Walker is dismantling it and pulling all that back and making the hugest cuts in education that have ever been made in history. And that's an ugly vision for the cities and especially for Milwaukee.
All right, shifting gears, let's talk baseball for just a minute. The Milwaukee Brewers are off to an absolutely horrible start this season. They just keep losing and losing and losing. The headlines are the same every day. Is it way too early to give up on them, or is there still a chance that they could bounce back like they did last year?
Come on, Mr.
I don't know.
Come on, Mr. Optimist.
You know what? And I have been extraordinarily optimistic about the Brewers' chances of making it into the playoffs, of at least having a solid run. And
so this
year, I'm not feeling it. They're getting close to midseason, and they're already so woefully behind at the bottom, certainly in the division, that
behind the Cubs,
behind the hated Cubs, no less, that we can't realistically proclaim that they're going to be competitive come September unless they make some hugely dramatic turnaround with the players and the coaching staff that they have.
Now, the other day, Atanasio said, "Oh, the problem is not Ron Reineke," which makes you think immediately, that might be a change might be coming.
Is that like the owner giving the manager a vote of confidence, the dreaded vote of confidence? I think Reineke's part of the problem. There are a lot of problems. I think like Ned Yost and Ken Maka before him, there's no fire in the belly with this guy, and he makes weird moves, and I don't think he knows how to handle what little pitching staff he has. The pitching is woeful. Giovanni Gallardo is having a terrible season, the worst season of his career.
No closers.
No closers. The rest of the starters are awful. Loesch has turned out to be a bust. The offense, other than two guys that are really hitting hot, that really hasn't transferred into victories, though. And their terrible record, keep in mind, they had an 8 or 9 game winning streak early in the season, and they still have this terrible record. I agree with you. Even though I love the Brewers, I think the season's lost. And my late father, he wasn't the first one to come up with this, but it's true. I remember he used to say it all the time when it came to sports, you have to have the horses. And this team simply doesn't have the horses to even compete with the Cubs, and that's sad. This division's pretty tough with the Reds and the Cardinals, and I just don't see them making any moves.
I started watching hockey this week.
Does any of the blame fall on Doug Melvin?
No. And let me tell you, I mean, you know, I can't disagree with these guys that we've been losing. Yeah, I've noticed that too. You want to win, you know, when you play baseball?
And to bad teams.
No, let me tell you how much it's not a bad team.
No, I say we're losing to bad teams.
Gene Segura leading baseball in hitting. As a rookie, he'd be Rookie of the Year. He hands down, except he had too many at-bats last season. A terrific young shortstop that you can go out and see every time he plays. Gomez, who they've been waiting to develop for a few years now and has developed big time. He is great fun to watch. He's the fastest guy on the team, and he gets on base all the time, and now he's starting to hit 2 home runs a game. You know, that's terrific. That's terrific to watch.
But
we've had 5 or 6 guys. We got 5 or 6 guys. He was 6 until just recently, batting over 300.
A nucleus.
There's nothing to show for it.
Absolutely. And when you say Loesch is a bust, I disagree with that. Loesch has pitched some great games, none of which he won because they weren't scoring any runs for him. But Loesch has pitched a great game. Giovanni Gallardo is going to come back. Everybody knows he's a great pitcher. Remember, we're going to start this season with just Giovanni Gallardo and 4 young pitchers that, you know, we didn't know if they were any good or not. We picked up Loesch at least and got another good pitcher. Estrada is starting to pitch good. No, but I would like to win a few games.
But once the attendance starts falling, which you know it's going to happen in the next couple
Oh, by the way, Corey Hart isn't playing yet.
you know that this owner, Attanasio, is a brilliant business person. He is not going to let this just go on.
Right. Okay. Well, the big disclaimer, this is that baseball is not my sport. I enjoy spending my time in the garden during the summer, so it's not really my thing. But I will say this. The Brewers games are entertaining. There's a lot of entertainment value, even if there's not great stuff going on in the field.
Talk about a positive
so
spin.
that's going to help in terms of attendance because people like it. The other thing is the Brewers are a state team. People make plans to come down to the game, and they're going to come regardless of whether or not the team's winning. I will say this. I'm really, really grateful for the fact that the Brewers continue to be, when they're not strong on the field, they're really strong in the community and continue to do a lot of things for education, particularly around scholarships for students and athletic support for young kids. So that's a positive.
And they don't cross against a red light and they eat apple pie and take their vitamins.
I didn't say all that.
But go out and win some games for crying out loud.
We'd all like to see that.
I would like to see that.
All right. Big news, and a big surprise on the congressional front this week. Minnesota Congresswoman and conservative firebrand Michele Bachmann put out a video saying she won't be running for re-election in 2014. Now, whenever a prominent politician calls it quits, it's time for a little bit of reflection. Rick Horowitz does the honors, and it's not as simple as you might think. Rick.
Michele Bachmann, so many punchlines, so little time. So instead of jokes, let me start with some long-ago words of wisdom from my father. I know you don't get Michele Bachmann and words of wisdom in the same paragraph very often, but that's kind of the point. Keep your mouth shut, my father used to say, and people may think you're a fool. Open your mouth and you'll dispel all doubt. Michele Bachmann opened her mouth a lot. Michele Bachmann stood out. Even in a party famously dismissive of the reality-based community, people who deal in facts, even in a party like that, she stood out. For her firm grasp of the ungraspable, for her far-right attraction to the demonstrably wrong. Or do you also think that the Founding Fathers got rid of slavery back in the 1700s, that HPV vaccinations caused mental retardation, that Concord, Massachusetts is located in New Hampshire? Michele Bachmann dispelled all doubt over and over again. But here's the question I'm still wrestling with. Exactly what kind of a fool is she? I mean, in the pecking order of foolitude, what's worse? Being absolutely convinced that something is true when it's absolutely not? Or thinking something might be true because you read it somewhere on the internet, but not bothering to lift a finger to find out for sure one way or the other? How about trying to play everyone else for a fool, knowing that what you're saying isn't even vaguely true, but saying it anyway for political advantage? Which category best describes Michele Bachmann and the rest of her fact-free ilk? And which is the greater failing? Then there's the overheated speculation. How do we know the IRS won't stop Tea Partiers from getting health care? Really? How do we know Obama won't set up internment camps for his political opponents? Really? I mean, how do we know that alien life forms aren't flying the black helicopters the government is secretly funding through Planned Parenthood and the National Endowment for the Arts? Hey, how do we know that Michele Bachmann isn't an alien life form sent to Earth to try to stupidify the rest of us? Now that one sounds more plausible all the time.
Well, thanks, Rick, and thank you so very much for watching. Enjoy the rest of your weekend.